We begin this hour with the very latest in terms of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Sources in Ukraine say the military has blown up a key railway connection deep in Russia's eastern territory. The supply route, which saw a sequence of attacks this week, is a key piece of military infrastructure, and it's the main rail connection between Russia and China. CBC's Dominic Velitis brings us the details.
According to unverified reports, Ukraine's security service was behind 2 attacks on military supply routes in Russia's Far East this week. Explosions were first reported on a freight train which was running through the Severomyskyi tunnel in Siberia on Wednesday evening. At 15 kilometers, it's Russia's longest railway tunnel and lies just north of Mongolia. And the incident forced the Russians to then divert trains via the nearby Chertov Bridge, which was reportedly hit the following day. So it seems these attacks, Natasha, were coordinated, that getting the trains to divert to the bridge route after bombing the tunnel was exactly what the Ukrainians had planned all along. It doesn't look like there were any casualties, but the explosions, which we are told damaged fuel tanks and, of course, railway lines, appear to show Ukraine's readiness and indeed its ability to conduct sabotage operations deep inside Russian territory and disrupt its logistics far away from the front line of Moscow's 21-month-old war in Ukraine. Now, there's been no official or public comment from the Russian government about these attacks, but Moscow has reportedly begun an inquiry into what it's describing as a criminal case of terrorism. Natasha.
And Dom, in the meantime, Russia says it's expanding its military capacity. What do we know about that?
Yeah, that's right. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has just signed a decree which will increase Russian troop numbers by 15%. That's about 170,000 extra troops. Russia's defense ministry says it will be a gradual process with the extra numbers added through a recruitment drive. So this isn't going to be another mobilization or changes to conscription of any kind, but rather is being billed as a genuine attempt by the Russian state to attract citizens to sign up for military service under contract. And if it is successful, Natasha, it will bring the total number of personnel in Russia's armed forces to more than 1.3 million. It is a response, Russia's defense ministry says, to a general increase in threats that the country is facing, including from the expansion of NATO. Meanwhile, Ukraine too is planning to make some changes on this particular front. President Volodymyr Zelensky is looking to improve the system of mobilization within his country, with many brigades now reportedly dominated by soldiers in their 50s. Commanders are keen to draw in younger and more skilled recruits. So a number of areas are going to be examined to try and attract those that type of recruits, including conditions for those who join and how long they actually serve for. Natasha.
CBC's Dominic Velitis reporting. Well, for more on this, we're joined now by Peter Zwak. He's a retired U.S. Brigadier General and a former military attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. He's also the author of Swimming the Volga, a U.S. Army officer's experience in pre-Putin Russia. General Zwak, it's been a long time since we've seen you, sir. Good to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for having me.
Sir, before we get into the specifics of what's happened today and what Russia is planning for, can you just bring us up to date? Because in light of world events these days, we've sort of stopped tracking what's going on in Ukraine. Where is the Ukrainian military positioned at this point, and where is the Russian military?
It's a great question, and going to your point, we collectively, the free-minded world, cannot lose its focus on Ukraine. We have a genuine crisis going on with Israel and Gaza, and it's obviously of serious interest and concern. But Ukraine and Russia have been wrapped now almost in a 2-year existential fight, and the Ukrainians are holding their own, but it's been hard. The summer didn't go as well as they had hoped, but they are absolutely in the gritty fight. The Russians are continuing to try to chisel away at Ukrainian lines as we speak, as we hear about Avdiivka, which is sort of the new Bakhmut, which was the big name a few months ago, and they're just trying to grind it out. But the Ukrainians are still giving more than they're taking. They have been significantly helped by our collective weapons and support. It's not enough. It needs to continue, can't draw down. So the Ukrainians are determined. They're going to stay in it. And the line is it's pretty inflexible right now. There's been some gains near Kherson in the south over the Dnipro River. And then all eyes are also watching, are the Russians going to be able to grind out some successes? But to get at the point of the call-up, the mobilization, the Russians have taken terrible losses, and they're taking terrible losses now, and that's sometimes lost in all the reporting.
Okay, so much to pull apart there. Could we return to the events of the day, or within the last 24 hours, this big hit on a Siberian target where it's a major rail connection, it's the main thoroughfare from Russia into China. What is the significance of that being hit?
Yes, it's very significant. And what it means to me is that it's more than just the attacks, it's the breadth, the reach. I mean, this is 4,000 miles away from the Ukrainian border, roughly. Whether the Ukrainians actually did it, or they had agents doing it for them, or they took credit for something that was organically done by Russians, it's a major, significant blow, because this is in the Russian heartland. This is in Siberia. This is far, on a sensitive rail line that was built in the 80s to provide some fallback in case there were problems with the Chinese on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So it's fragile. It's embarrassing to the Russians. What it shows is that you can't defend everywhere. And if you have to look over your shoulder deep in the Russian hinterland for fifth column, for saboteurs, however they're sent, or they're homegrown, who got the explosives there? How did that happen? That requires organization and infrastructure. I believe that you've got part of this is Russian homegrown, and probably what worries the Russians the most. And the Ukrainians have been able to tap into that, much as maybe the British tapped into the French resistance in the Second World War in France, and not when it was Nazi occupied. Don't know. Very significant, because these things have been going on also in Western Russia for some time. Factories, rail lines, highways. Clearly, the Russians don't have complete control of the area, and they certainly, by extension, don't have full support for this awful war.
General Zwack, there's so much to cover, and I'm fearing we're running out of time. But okay, let me ask you then about the fact that winter is here, and we are going into the second winter of this war. So, actually, it's the third, if you think about it, since this thing started in February. So, Zelensky has said that they weren't as successful as he had hoped with the summer counteroffensive. But as you said off the top, they're still making their way through this. They're still going. What will winter bring as we continue along in this war?
Fighting any time is hard. It's really hard in winter, because you're now, besides trying to survive enemy fire, you're now trying to survive from freezing to death. And I think that the Ukrainians on the whole are better supplied and prepared for winter than the Russian conscripts and troops up along that 600 miles of battlefront. And there's nothing that erodes more morale is when you're fighting, you have a motivated enemy, and you're freezing.
So then let me ask you then about the Russians, because Putin says, he announced, I believe on Friday, they're increasing their troops by 170,000. From where? Is that at all realistic?
Natasha, again, a great question. The Russians have the people. It's whether they dip and how do they do it. They don't want to go into a conscription, the drafting, especially into what you would call major traditional Russian cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg. They've been the bill payers for this war in large preponderance have been Russians from the ethnic minorities out in the hinterland, and they can't keep continuing to go to that well. Yes, they said in this call-up of 170,000, yes, these will be mostly volunteers. I think that's aspirational. And they won't be draftees. So how do they do that? And the devil will be in the details, but it shows they are stressed numerically. Also very interesting, just a few weeks ago, Putin working a decree with encouraging Russian mothers to have 8 children each. That gets into the demographic challenge of the war and the bigger demographic challenge of the entire Russian Federation.
Retired U.S. Brigadier General Peter Zwak, thank you as always for your time.
Thank you, Natasha. Take care.
You too, sir.